This is my first time using it. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, maybe we don't need that. I cannot tell.
We're live.
We're live, but I cannot tell if anyone when we'll have people watching. So maybe I'll over to the YouTube.
Shall I open it on my phone?
Yeah, maybe that might help.
But then again, I can only see it as an audience member, so I don't know if I can actually usefully.
I'm trying. I can't.
Oh, can you put it on the Twitter, DC?
I'm trying with the limited letters that I have. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
Oh, okay.
So that's what it's like. It takes me a long time because I have to find the F and then copy it. So I'm doing that right now. So you know what?
Oh, okay. We're people. Hi, everyone. Kayla's here. That's so nice. Do we wait like 5 minutes before we start? Hi, Mabel. I should probably say hi to everyone because I've said hi to 2 people. Hi, Charlotte and Corvus. I hope everyone is ready because we are not ready, but we are gonna get started.
Readiness is a state of mind.
I just got this top from ASOS because it reminded me of the PP one in I Promised You the Moon. It was like a real kind of, it was the moment where Al gave the sunflowers to Ted after Ted did the university graduate show, I think. And I don't know if it's not the same top, I think, but it's like.
All right. Got it. All right. Wow, I do not want to hear myself. Oh, just.
I'm assuming everyone can hear us both. Should we do a test? Should we? I don't know.
I'm on the YouTube and I can hear myself. I'm sorry for sounding like that. It's just the way my voice is. Have you ever just like heard yourself recorded and you're just like, oh my god!
Oh my god! All the time.
Every single time I record myself, that is me.
I was like, I want to send out an apology letter to everybody who has ever heard me in my life.
Hi, Anna Riel. Thanks for dropping by and just saying hi. No, I hate my voice. Every time I'm recording, I'm like, I'm gonna try and be less nasal. I feel like I don't know. I feel like I need to wash my sinuses or my cavities or something. Is there like a nasal douche? Like I feel like
yes,
they're called a neti pot. They exist. Don't ask me why I know that. I just do.
Watch me sound different, like in a week.
I would do like every so often. We do nasal irrigation with a little pot, and you take the water, and you put it through, and like it goes through, and it's.
Can some get in your brain?
No.
No. What? What? No. Why
you just need to get
that. Do you know biology at all?
No, I don't know biology. I only know biology because of the Simpsons Crayon episode, and then it's like,
which is
that's a very short path.
Which is also biologically incorrect. So.
We should get started because I'm going to assume people have shown up in the 5 minutes that we waited. But I don't know how to do an introduction, so I'm just going to be like, I don't know, let me switch modes. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Femmes React Live. We're here joined by DC and Dr. Thomas Baudinette. Yay, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
My timing's so we're planning to do a deep dive into the beer industry and just leeching. I'm trying to think of a word that doesn't sound weird. Like milking or like extracting all the knowledge from Thomas's brain while he's here for the next hour and a half that we have. Thank you everyone for joining us to our third live that we're running on this channel. Hopefully we can do some more in the future. But yeah, I'm so excited to have Dr. Thomas Baudinette. Do you want to do a quick intro of yourself and your studies? Fun fact, you're also in the same part of Australia as me.
Yes. So we're both up early and struggling, I think. To introduce myself, so I'm going to give you my professional spiel. So I'm Dr. Thomas Baudinette. I am a senior lecturer in Japanese and International Studies at Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia, in the Department of Media Communication, Creative Arts, Languages and Literatures. Very long name. And yeah, so I'm an anthropologist and I have a strong research interest in the queer medias of East and Southeast Asia. I have published widely on the topic of boys love media as well as Japanese queer popular culture more broadly. And I think today I'm really here to share with you the kind of insights that I've gathered as a fan of boys love media from a variety of different social contexts. As well as the results, particularly of the research I've been doing in the Thai context. So for people who may know me from social media, I am quite involved in the study of Thai BL in particular, and I have a book coming out next year with Bloomsbury called Boys Love Media in Thailand, Celebrity, Fans and Transnational Asian Queer Popular Culture, which is based on over 8 years of research into the Thai BL industry. And I do take a particular focus on the industry, so not just fandom that I also study, but looking at production as well. So I've been very privileged to have received a lot of insights on the production side of things, which I hope to elucidate today, because there's a lot of stuff that gets circulated on social media that is, to put it quite bluntly, wrong. And I have some things to share in regards to that.
Oh my God.
Having me.
That's so good. That's such a good introduction. I feel like I need to learn how to introduce myself like that in the future. Yeah, I think this would be a great conversation to start having, because I think watching BL, I've always had this like these questions about the evolution and kind of the way that it's being produced, and also I guess the quite obvious motivations for capital gain for some of the producers. I think as queer people, we're very attuned and used to society or the idea of the pink dollar in at least the West being targeted at for money. And then also, I guess, as the queer rights movement has been kind of happening, you have all these corporations kind of jumping on board, and you're like, where were you in the past, So it's like interesting to see how it works in Asia. I think what we
know, Edison, the world is going to be fixed because Nike changed their logo to be a rainbow tick for a month.
I didn't know that. That's really great.
That's queer rights have been achieved because of those rainbow logos on Twitter. Hooray! Well done. No, but I guess I should. I guess one thing I want to say right at the outset is that those of us, particularly in quote unquote Western contexts, so North America, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, etc., have grown up with a healthy suspicion of capitalism, which we should have, and I absolutely believe that we need to have. However, I think that kind of suspicion of kind of the potentials of capitalism to expand queer representation in politics within East and Southeast Asian contexts needs a lot more nuance than is currently being brought to the discussion. And if there's anything that I want to emphasize today, is that maybe something that makes money from a variety of different kind of audiences can have a utility within social context within which legal representations and protections do not exist, and that we can't necessarily take the media narratives and theories that we have kind of developed within particularly North American context and just go plop into East and Southeast Asia without thinking about how the East or Southeast Asian context can actually challenge some of the fundamental assumptions. And that's really one of the things that motivates my scholarship within this space. And I do so partly because as an Anglo-Celtic Australian with also French blood, you know, the kind of my outsider status and so forth, I'm not here to impose my knowledge that I've developed. It's for me to actually go to and learn from. And the process of engaging with this stuff over 13 years for me has been radically transformative, and changed the way I think about the world. So I hope to share those kind of transformations today as well.
Yes, I hope we get a sponsorship from 23andMe or something. Let's start from the beginning of BL. From what I know from how BL started in Thailand, it kind of launched off of Love of Siam and then Lovesick and Sodas, and then kind of grew from there. What's your sort of analysis of the origins of BL and how did it get so big?
I guess the first thing that I would flag is that we can take it earlier. So in order to understand the history of BL in Thailand, we'd need to actually understand the history of BL in its kind of home country of Japan first, because that's where it emerges as a genre. And I think that that's well known now, though when Thai BL first emerged, there were many consumers who weren't aware of this historical link. So Japanese BL as a predominantly comics-based culture, we can see it kind of formally emerge in the 1970s. But there's even we can take it back further if we so desire, but I'm not going to go there. What we had was these kind of women creatives, some who identified at the time as straight, some who identified as queer in some way, shape or form, some who have only come to that realization later in their lives, were engaging with a variety of transnational media texts. For instance, they all had watched this French film focused on trans, kind of, well, what we would now call trans, though back then transvestite was the term, or hermaphrodite, which, but anyway, this film focused on kind of beautiful cross-dressing trans-ish French boys, and they became really interested in that. And at the same time, one of the kind of seminal movers and shakers within this movement, two of them, Moto Hagio and Takemiya Keiko, were also living in the apartment building in which many of the contributors to Japan's first gay magazine, Barazoku, were living. So they had access to that as well. And they became increasingly interested in homoerotic and romantic entanglements between men as this kind of site to explore their own sexual experience and the kind of suppressed sexuality of women in Japanese society. So that's where BL comes from, this kind of transformative moment where these young female artists saw a queer French film, read a gay manga in Barazoku, and said, you know what, this is a great space for women to also explore their sexuality, and began writing such seminal works as the Po Clan and the Song of the Trees and the Wind. And yeah, then it becomes this huge commercial boom, focused almost 90% of it on heterosexual female audiences. And I think one of the things I want to emphasize right at the outset is that whilst they're the majority consumers in Japan and Thailand and elsewhere, there is a long history of queer male and queer female consumership and production of BL that often gets elided in fan debates in Anglophone spaces. And we should recognize that the genre isn't just something that het girls read. It's much more expansive and always has been. But yeah, so as a genre, it transnationalized out of Japan in the 80s and 90s. And that's where we see the first connections with Thailand as young women in major cities like Bangkok, Chiang Mai, etc., had access to pirated copies of BL manga in the 90s that were being sold on the street and so forth. And that's where we see an audience for BL tied to Japan begin to emerge. And then eventually these girls started writing their own comics, as did some gay men. They were involved, as I emphasized, but predominantly girls. And then eventually that leads to the production of the TV series, because there was this kind of worry amongst television executives in the middle of the 2010s, like, oh, why aren't young people watching TV anymore? What can we do? Oh, these particular series look to be popular. All the girls are reading these kind of boy online novels. Why don't we transform one into a TV series? That's the origin of Lovesick. And then GMM TV, subsidiary of Thailand's largest media conglomeration, GMM Grammy, predominantly a music company. They had launched a television company in 2012, I think it was. It wasn't doing too well. So likewise, they decided to jump on the BL bandwagon and reached out to first Hideko Sunshine to write queer kind of boy narratives as subplots within some of their works. And then in 2016, quite famously, they transformed Bittersweet's novel Sotus into a TV series. And that really saved their company and also led to the BL boom that we're currently seeing today. So sorry for the long answer, but like, it's a long, complicated history.
I know, but it's so interesting to know that it was intentionally seen as something that could be profitable, you know.
Yeah, and it wasn't, you know, unfortunately, it wasn't due to this kind of motivation of like, well, let's tell queer stories and explore queer experience, blah blah blah. It was very utilitarian. We understand, so the companies, and they say this quite explicitly in Grammy's annual reports from around 2017 through to 2019. You know, they're talking about that their market research reveals that young women in their 20s and 30s, so not high school girls, but 20s and 30s, are their primary consumer base, and they want to produce things that they will watch. So handsome boys kissing is a good way to make money. And then it's only in later years that the company itself has begun to kind of recognize the kind of social responsibilities that having this sort of market model necessitates. And that's also because of LGBTQ creatives in GMM in particular, who have been increasingly pushing for more socially engaged, socially conscious work. And I think 2022 and 2021, we've seen a number of examples of that. And moving forward, hopefully, we'll see more. But yeah, so it really was motivated by, we need to make money because our company isn't doing as well as we would like. This is a quick way for us to make money. Let's create this new system of television production and celebrity promotion tied to this already existing popular culture form. And that had the secondary, and from the company's perspective, unexpected kind of impact of increasing queer visibility and introducing kind of politics into Thai televisual culture that, you know, they just weren't ready for. But I guess just because they were there to make money doesn't necessarily mean that the media themselves can't be consumed or used by people to be kind of political. And I think that that's something that I'd like to emphasize.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of interplay, it seems, between, you know, the producers and the people after the money, and then also the people behind the scenes who are a bit more sensitive to the queer narratives, and then I guess audience demand, and how that sort of steered the course of, how do you see that evolution playing out from, you know, the origins to now in terms of?
Yeah, so I think what's really been quite interesting to me is 2016 through to 2018, which is, in my book, I historicize this as the period between Sotus through to Love by Chance, which were the two big hits at the time, were really about kind of, it's very classic BL tropey, if you will, and there's not a lot of politics. There's a lot of problematic representation around kind of reinforcing heteronormative ideas around gender. There's a lot of issues around sexual consent and also kind of romanticization of sexual violence, which I want to put a pin in and kind of flag that Thailand has always had a really problematic relationship within its popular media, whether it be queer or straight, with sexual violence as a romanticized trope. So that's not exclusive to BL in Thailand. It's just that Thailand already has this kind of narrative in its romantic stories of like, I'll rape you till I love you, or I'll rape you to punish you. So BL just kind of picked up on that, which is, yeah, really problematic. But I think we're beginning to see a shift away. But yeah, so that kind of classic period in which things were replicating what was going on in Japan in the 80s and 90s, which was not the most enlightened period for Japanese BL either, has kind of given way since 2019 to a much more politically engaged form of BL. And one watershed moment, and I'm saying this not just because of my, my polka bias, but like one show that, yeah, that's Teen News. Yeah, get out of the way. Yeah, so one is we had Dark Blue Kiss, which was one of the first of GMM's BL series to really engage with political questions. And it is not a coincidence that the director is Alf Nopper, whatever his, I can't remember his full name, but P. Alf, who is also the director of a number of significant political...
Bad Buddy, Tale of a Thousand Stars.
Yeah.
And then, what is he doing next?
He was Twilight with...
Yeah, that one.
And I think, but also Jojo Chichikon was involved with, and ex Mongsukut as well. Like there's these gay directors who in 2019 were kind of spreading their wings a bit with regards to GMM, beginning to think of BL as a vehicle for more politically engaged storytelling. So 2020 then, of course, is the era of what I call the mass appeal. So we enter the period of Together, which, whilst Together as a narrative was perhaps a throwback to that more classic, less politically engaged BL, what it did do, which is significant, is demonstrated quite conclusively, both in Thailand but also internationally, that boys' love was economically sound. So one of the things that we see, for instance, within the West is that even to this day, producers kind of think of LGBTQ stories as niche, right? Which is not the case at all, right? And creators and actors and everyone involved in the industry are well aware of the fact that you can explore universal romantic themes through the love between two men or two women or two gender non-conforming people. But from the perspective of the conservative media landscape, beyond kind of tokenistic representation, there's this idea that these aren't universal stories. Whereas within the boys' love context of Thailand and increasingly also of such spaces as South Korea or Taiwan, there's a kind of useful linking together of, okay, well, this kind of caters to the LGBTQ audience, but it's also a mainstream popular culture tied to women's consumer culture, which is the kind of perfect combination for economic success. And hence, Thai production companies now recognize the economic viability of BL, and that has transformed and kind of within the region has convinced, for example, Japan to invest into Thai BL live action, which up until recently was remarkably unsuccessful economically, and the Philippines, which has also been using the BL boom of 2020 to produce their own kind of more politically engaged form of BL and kind of think about some of the questions that the Thai BL industry hasn't necessarily been thinking about, which is why I think Pinoy BL has a really useful role to play. The only problem being that within the global media landscape, the Philippines gets marginalized due to the kind of racist superstructures that exist within Asia as well as the world, and that's very unfortunate. So yeah, I think that this is when I think about the transformations, it has also been responding to consumer demand. Within Thailand in particular, many people listening may be familiar with the fact that 2019 through to 2020 and 2021 have seen a huge political awakening amongst young people in particular that is part of a broader history of resistance to Thailand's politically conservative regimes and military juntas, as well as an organization that we cannot name legally. But as part and parcel of that, many of the youth protesters, like many of the people who've been leading those movements, have been LGBTQ. And as there has been debates, high-profile debates within, the introduction of marriage equality in Thailand, which went before the Constitutional Court, who came out with an absolutely atrocious ruling that was incredibly homophobic, and then also questions of broader human rights in the country. Young people want politically engaged content. And that means that you're seeing both fans in Thailand, as well as the significant number of international fans, pushing for more politically engaged content. And then you see young people involved in the industry, such as, for example, Tun Pakon or Mik Sahapap, who use their platform as celebrities active in the BL industry to advocate for LGBTQ issues. Zee is another classic example of that. So that's what leads to, in 2021, for instance, Cutie Pie ending, starring Zee from Dumundi, ending with a call for marriage equality, and seeing that being discussed throughout the series. And of course, it's not at all coincidental that Dumundi is run by the main manager is also named Alf and also a prominent gay man. So there's these kind of really obvious connections that if you deep dive, you see this shift away from Thai BL being, socially at least, a kind of fetishized het women kind of space, even as from a production perspective, that's how this stuff is rationalized to conservative kind of media companies and advertising agencies. Because the BL industry, it makes its money through advertising. That's how it functions. Hence why Vice Versa is full of product placement and The Eclipse isn't. Everyone wondering why there's so much product placement in Vice Versa. It's so that The Eclipse wouldn't have any. That's why. And if you go back to The Eclipse, you'll see that quite explicitly. And it was deliberate. So I hope that Last Twilight doesn't get too much product placement. But product placement is important. It's important to the industry because that's how they make their money. And the money is what runs and pushes forward everything. But money makes the world go round, unfortunately.
But if there isn't egregious product placement in a BL, is it even a BL? If they're like
this is
drinking on the drink and stuff like that.
If there's no Oishi honey lemon, then I just don't feel romantically kind of I just can't feel the kind of the tension. But this is the thing, they're getting increasingly clever with how they use it too. I was kind of pointing out Vice Versa as an example of perhaps excessive product placement, but at the same time, you see moments of, you see moments of intense emotionality being mediated through the products being sold, to the point where Jimmy C's fandom name is based on a scene that was focusing on selling Eurocream Choco Pie, right? Likewise, Boon Prem from Until We Meet Again were instantly tied to Lay's, which is why everyone's so disappointed that the Between Us major sponsor is Yen Yen, and so there's no chips, and that's what for someone who's been in that fandom for 3 years, I was like, where are the chips? Where are the chips? But this is the thing, that all ties to what we academics call the effective politics of Thai BL. It's the emotionality and the way that consuming produces particular fantasies. And yes, those fantasies are then implicated in the capitalist logics of accumulation that justify the production of the media industries. But I think if we just take some kind of overly skeptical or instantly dismissive approach to that, we forget the fact that yes, it needs to make money, but it still serves a purpose. And most importantly, we as consumers have agency to consume and understand what we consume. We're not all maybe not all, but most of us aren't Delulu nonsense, right? like, you know, I can have a critical engagement and yet still buy Oishi honey lemon when I'm in Thailand because I know what it is, and I do. So yeah, like this is I think something that I emphasize a lot in the book that I've written, that we need to be kind of judicial in our criticisms of this kind of commercialization, because it produces the industry and hence produces a space in which queer romance and queer sexuality can be explored by consumers who engage with the content, as well as used by authors, such as, for example, Prabhat, the gay man who wrote The Eclipse and Miracle of Teddy Bear, or directors such as P. Alf or P. Jojo, who want to create narratives to explore queer experience. And you know, the economics of BL has now proven to Thailand that there can be a space for queer production, which now leads to Gap Yuri and next year 23.5 or whatever it was called. So we're getting Girls Love finally, because the media companies know that it's economically viable. So eventually, you know, it leads to an explosion of representation. And, you know, it's quite ironic that media, like societies that are remarkably conservative sexually and that do not have the kind of legal protections that, for example, North America, Australia, some of Western Europe has, where you're seeing queer narratives getting kind of cancelled. And yet the societies that on paper look like they shouldn't be producing them are producing them. And I guess from my perspective, it just reveals that sometimes when you have representation, like, it doesn't necessarily lead to a lot of representation. I don't know. It's something I'm still trying to wrap my head around. It's a fundamental paradox. I can't quite understand why, but that seems to be the way the winds are blowing.
It's also very interesting because also the properties such as and Cupid's Last Wish, and then together you both see them. Not only do they sell products and advertising, they also produce products themselves.
Yes.
Like you can also get the Together dolls, and I wanted the Caitlin like from Cupid's Last Wish, that little cow.
Yeah.
That.
I mean, this room, as I said, is filled with merch. If you look behind me, and like I 100% will buy. Like I have my little TNU standees. I have my Eclipse photo cards. I go to the concerts, and it does, like, it's commercial, and I think that we need to stop kind of dismissing that outright, like. And then it's okay to want to participate in this kind of commercialized fan merch driven culture, because ultimately, you know, the interviews with fans that I've had in Thailand, in China, in the Philippines, in Japan, some of the people I've spoken to in Australia, though not necessarily formally as an academic, you know, the one thing that unites them is the fact that consuming this kind of popular culture broadly makes them feel good, even if they're able to kind of point out things that don't resonate politically or culturally with them. And it also produces this kind of aspirational kind of, what I, in my book, position as queer utopic thinking. You know, it's not just as simple as like, I'm buying this stuff because I like it. It's embedded within a broader personal politics that's kind of like, okay, I'm engaging in BL fandom because, for instance, I'm a Filipino fan, and I live in a society dominated by the Catholic Church, and my family's homophobic, and engaging with this stuff allows me to have this release valve, and it allows me to see a kind of image of pure romantic love that I, as a gay man, queer woman, what have you, don't necessarily get in my everyday life or from my local media. And I think that that's one of the reasons why BL has become so transformative. And like, we're lucky, actually, very privileged that the industry is beginning to evolve and kind of deepen its political engagement. And in many ways, that's natural when we think about the development of any genre or any media movement. You know, it starts off sounding the waters, and then once a space has been produced, then it can begin to become increasingly more engaged. That being said, with the Thai context, and I know that BL is more than just Thailand, but Thailand is what I know best. Within the Thai context, we need to remember that the legal frameworks and the socio-cultural norms of both the industry and society perhaps still inhibit what can and cannot be done in many ways. And then there's like South Korea, which is its own, particular, like, to be blunt, hellscape when it comes to heteropatriarchy and homophobia, and the industry having to negotiate that. And that's why a lot of the Korean stuff it ends in bromance, because it's about managing expectations in a society in which you've got radical Christian evangelical protesters screaming at pride events that you're going to hell, or a K-pop industry in which the conservative nature of the industry itself means that they have to kind of tease and play around with things rather than be upfront. You just need to look at the fact that Holland was kicked out of his agency because he wanted to be an openly gay idol, right? And then, earlier this year he was bashed. Yay, Korea. Right? So
how do you feel that I know that a lot of these TV channels and things like that put it for domestic use, but how do you feel that the internet has played into that? Because a lot of these companies have their own YouTube channel, and what they can put on there, as opposed to what they can show domestically, some of the international edits versus the domestic edits and stuff like that. How do you feel that has played into?
I think that, we're very lucky as international fans of Thai content, for instance, that we don't have to put up with the censored versions that are broadcast on TV, and then that we have access to the uncut content. And Thailand does have very strict laws around and media censorship laws, very, very strict laws that can even lead to lèse-majesté, for instance, and like you need to be careful with what you say. And some of the obscenity laws that are applied in Thailand, which, for example, limit the representation of any sexual act or any even romantic act, the laws are written in such a vague way that the companies have in the past self-censored, which is why in the early kind of era of BL, like Lovesick didn't have a kiss scene, right? It was only ever in the uncut version, and fans dug it up. Likewise, you only had one kiss in, or like one or two kisses in SOTUS at the very end, whereas like you watch stuff nowadays, and not only are they basically chewing each other's tongues off, they're also hopping into bed, right? But that stuff isn't broadcast on television. That's what's released on the streaming services, many of which are international companies, which facilitates the broadcast of the NC, the no kids, the no children scenes, because Thai media culture is very kind of restrictive in what it can portray. And then you add in the fact that it's between two men, or like with GL, two women, it adds what we call a chilling effect. Like the companies are going to be more kind of careful with it because of the fact that the Ministry of Culture, and which is the ministry that manages kind of broadcast media and the censorship regime, are much more likely to be punitive towards that sort of content than elsewhere. Likewise, the same is true of South Korea. Whereas Japan and Taiwan have extraordinarily open, Japan famously has very open kind of media censorship nowadays. So it allows for more things to be broadcast, though Japanese television just tends to be kind of sex averse in general. Like other aspects of Japanese media is extremely sex forward, but like television, broadcast television, not at all. So it's interesting because the media ecology also stymies what can and cannot be done. And yet companies are increasingly finding ways to, I don't want to say circumvent, because that's not what they're doing. They're using that system to their benefit. And if they can slap on an extra subscription cost in order to get you to access that online kind of more spicy content, well, then that also helps them with their broader kind of market model. And I think that that's really important because we're working within a space in which yes, you have to pay more, and yes, it's based on having to move around a restrictive censorship regime. But the fact of the matter is, you've got all these mainstream media producers in Thailand who are like, okay, well, sex between men isn't something that's icky. Let's actually focus on it. And I think that that's important, because a lot of the debates over, like some of the debates over NC scenes as being like kind of fetishistic and trying to just make a quick buck, neglect to once again think about the broader visibility politics that are operating within a socially conservative media context. And that's because a lot of international fans aren't necessarily familiar with the kind of legal regimes of kind of media, the media of the Thai media ecology or the South Korean media ecology. And it's important to remember that they're producing things within the context that they can produce it. And when you think about how restrictive some markets in Asia are, mainland China with its outright and explicit ban on representations of male love, the same is true of Singapore. Like it really shows you that they're able to do quite a lot compared to other contexts. And I think that, that should be celebrated a little bit more than it possibly is.
Yeah, I found that, and especially we noticed this when we were watching Not Me, that we have to be cognizant of them having to get through censors, because some of the stuff we understood it was political, but it was like it didn't really kind of make sense, and it kind of like they were skirting some censors, and they didn't want to, and it was a very heavily politically challenge, and the ending was just kind of like it's not that, but you have to understand. We had to be cognizant of that. Okay, they didn't want to run afoul.
So I mean, with Not Me is like like for Thailand, Not Me, The Eclipse, and also it's not a BL, but The Gifted, which was starring Nanon Korapat. Like they're extraordinarily political shows in the context of Thailand. And Not Me in particular, there's reasons why the villain is a businessman, right? But like it's everyone watching that is well aware of the fact that businessman is standing in for the Prime Minister, Prayut Chan-o-cha, right? Like it's very obvious to a Thai consumer that that's what's going on. But they can't be that explicit. They have to transform it into a businessman with potentially shady links to government, but they're not criticizing the government. They're criticizing some evil businessman, right? But any Thai youth watching that show knows that that's a stand-in for both the government itself and also, once again, institutions that we cannot name, which I hope everyone understands what I'm referring to in that context. So I think that's significant. And to their credit, I think most international fans are beginning to understand this. And in fact, the broadcast of Not Me was a useful moment to teach people about the more subversive ways of reading. Likewise, the Eclipse, which is a perhaps not particularly subtle, but it doesn't need to be subtle to get its point across, like political allegory of contemporary Thai society. That school, Supalo, represents Thailand, right? And it represents everyone who is suffering under Thailand's restrictive focus on tradition. And that's not just queer people. And what's significant, and I really appreciated the twist in the twist in Eclipse. Spoiler alert for those who haven't watched it, so you might want to block your ears. When we find out that the superintendent, who was the enforcer of the regime, was himself a victim of the regime, right? That was actually very significant within Thai political discourse and in that context. And in this way, BL is doing the same sorts of things that like independent cinema, like Apichatpong Rachakun, who is like this kind of critical darling in the West. Like they're doing the same thing, but one is independent cinema and the other one is highly commercialized queer kind of romances for straight girls. At least that's how it's understood on the surface. So I think that like thinking about the transgressiveness of BL within its socio-cultural context and remembering that first and foremost, Thai BL in particular is responding to the Thai context. the companies, and I can say this with I know this because I've spoken to production companies, they will always be focusing on Thai consumers first, because that's predominantly where they get their money from. So in many ways, they're paying attention to the political sensitivities and discourses within Thailand first and foremost. And that's because Thai fans are more likely to buy Oishi Honey Lemon than we are, right? But also it's the Thai fans who are pushing for this political narrative and this political engagement. And some of these series are beginning to think about the industry itself. So the one that I know best is Lovely Rider, which focused on a lot of kind of the kind of ethical dilemmas that the industry puts on the actors themselves. And I was talking before we started recording, Edison, you mentioned War of Why. I haven't watched it except for the first couple because I like one of the actors. But that series really is deep diving into some of the politics, the murky kind of shady wheelings and dealings of Thai companies, though I would say with a lot of exaggeration in order to produce dramatic effect. My experiences engaging with the industry isn't that shady. But there is stuff going on that's dodgy, of course, but that's true of all media industries, right? So
yeah. Gosh, there's so much to figure out. Oh, DC, did you want to say something?
No, I was going to say I'm watching War of Why right now, and I'm almost. It's really. Sometimes in watching it, I have to figure out, okay, what's done for dramatic effect and what's done for this is it, So it's just.
I mean, it's like what I was saying with the eclipse. It doesn't need to be subtle in order to make a point, right? And I think that War of Why is not particularly subtle, but it's making a point. And maybe the lack of subtlety or the over-exaggeration of the problems in the industry is part of just making consumers aware of their complicity. In fact, there was an indie, like quite a smaller BL story. I don't know if either of you watched The Effect back in 2019. No, and most people didn't watch it, and including in Thailand. It was a very minor blip, but it was explicitly calling out the romanticization of rape through a narrative that actually focuses on the trauma of rape through the kind of BL conventions. And there's this fantastic scene, and I write about it in the book that I have coming out next year, where one of the guy, the seme in the couple, or the top in the couple, the praek in Thai, he'd raped the other character, and then the other character's friends attack him, and he basically gives all of the typical delusional responses, he wanted it, or I did it so he could learn to love me, blah, blah, blah. And then one of the characters basically punches him in the face and like, this is not a TV series. What you do has real effects. And you're being delusional. You're living in this sick fantasy world. And it's explicitly calling out the fans who engage in it that way. And that was part of that 2019 moment when we saw shifts in the series and saw shifts in the way that BL was beginning to reconcile with itself. And from my perspective, who has been researching and writing on the Japanese context, I'm kind of like, wow, Japanese BL manga hasn't had this moment of recognition of this problem yet. So kudos Thailand. But of course, this was a minor production that didn't necessarily get as much traction, and that's partly because it's low budget and not very good, but that moment was really quite powerful. And I should say, I watched, they film the rape and they film it not romanticized, and it was actually quite a hard watch. So if anyone's interested in checking it out.
What were you gonna say, Edison? Sorry.
Oh, I'm trying to. There's so many. I was just like, oh, there's so many tangents to go on. But one thing that I wanted to ask about, because we are at Femmes React, is the I guess representation of femme characters. Because when I started watching Sodas and Lovesick, I was like, wow, there's a stand-in for people like me who are a bit more flamboyant, and you saw one every episode in terms of how I guess, not stereotypical, but in a good way, they were.
Yeah.
And as I've watched BL, I feel like I've seen a decrease or a fading of these characters, especially in, you know, Lovely Writer. They say that the femme character can't be a lead, or a femme actor can't be a lead in a series. And then in Tono and Chonluti, they kind of like butched up Chonluti, to my knowledge, to be. And so like we've never really had a really flamboyant character until I feel like we've touched upon it again in Secret Crush on You. And so like, is your analysis in that, you know, now that we've gone to a stage where everyone knows it's commercially viable, that we can take more risks with? Because for me, I'm so like not worried, but like sensing that, you know, there's a potential for this industry to exploit queer people, queer narratives. And so it's all that interplay that I'm getting out of your discussion in terms of like, when is the right time to start diversifying the narratives? Or is the risk of the BL capitalistic model in that we only produce the most hottest, most, you know,
the one that's going to
standard.
appeal to the widest audience? So or like, I think maybe if I was going to put on my critical hat again, like what we're seeing is a kind of a regime in which certain tastes are being, it's like there's a pedagogical element to it. Like you're being taught that this is what you're supposed to like as much as anything. So there have been, you know, in Thailand, there have been prominent debates, for instance, about like, well, you know, all of the actors are Sino-Thai, so they're Thai with Chinese backgrounds. Like we're not seeing representation of the diversity that exists within Thailand. Where are all of the darker skinned people from the south and the north? Where are the kind of the rural migrants and the kind of relatively poorer sections of society from the northeast? Why are these stories focusing on, you know, wealthy, heteronormative kind of men living within the capital of Krung Thep, Bangkok, right? And you know, that's a broader issue with Thai media in general, that these kind of representations are kind of engaged with, and like, you know, it all ties into the broader issue of lookism within East and Southeast Asian media, for instance. And yes, you're quite right that you know, when I've written about Lovesick, both within my book and in a previous article, you know, I celebrate the fact that we have, for example, that Angels gang that does have the stereo, like they are stereotyped, but like great, like I love them because they were positively depicted, right? These kind of like really flamboyant and like you know, not effeminate kind of characters. And that they were there with a positive depiction, which is really significant because up until that moment, yes, there's always been a space for the transgendered and the kind of femme male within Thai media culture, but they're either reduced to a space of comedy or reduced to a space of danger, right? And yes, within Lovesick, the Angels gang are there predominantly for comedy, but they're also there to flesh out, you know, they're huge supporters of the main couple, and they help bring them together, etc. So they were more nuanced. But the fact of the matter is that they also existed structurally within the narrative in order to compartmentalize the central male-male romance between Pun and No as they're heteronormative, and that their romance sits within a different space. And we see this linguistically within GMM in particular, the ways in which they speak Thai, the use of gu, the use of mung, the use of a, sat, a, you know, all of these language terms is replicating a highly heteronormative, very kind of what I don't want to say macho form of masculinity, but it's a particular form of masculinity that's hegemonic in Thailand. And as much as I celebrate the kind of queering that BL is doing, it is also pushing forward a homogenizing view of male-male romance that is born out of the kind of idea that the main product that these media are selling is male celebrities, and that they're predominantly being sold to heterosexual women. So that's why Secret Crush on You, which I love. I mean, I'll show off my my signed photo of Billy here.
Signed.
But like, you know, I was really happy personally. I quite liked it. The stalking element aside, like I quite liked it because it was a romance that focused on, once again, we saw these characters come back, and I can't remember the characters' names now, but like, you know, they were there and they were being portrayed relatively positively, though once again you could make a criticism in the kind of dynamic of the relationship that they were all the bottoms versus the tops who were all traditionally masculine. But you even had one of the characters, Daisy, right? The only one I remember, having to, like, you know, they were like, oh, I can't be like femme. I need to give up I need to become a real man in order for this person to actually like me. And that's a comment on not like that's a comment on the kind of transphobic anti-femme kind of culture within gay male culture. Because it wasn't like I need to become manly and then get myself a girlfriend. It's I need to become manly to become sexually attractive to this other man. And then you have him turn around and say, like, I like you for who you are. And I was saying once again to Edison before we started the chat, you know, I was really frustrated because there were so many people calling for more kind of femme representation within BL. And then everyone was like dismissing Secret Crush on You. You know, some of the critiques of the stalking element I get, but the series actually never endorses it. It's always presented as this weird thing. And his friends kind of put up with it. And in the end, he learns that it's not a good thing to do. But at the same time, like, there are some people like, oh, it's reinforcing the gendered stereotype that to be gay is to be effeminate. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, and I'm just like, why can't you be happy? Like, just like, yeah. So I think sometimes one of my frustrations with Anglophone fan discourse in particular is that they're so embedded within a narrative of like, I need to be critical in order to be a kind of engaged fan. That they're like, yeah, poking holes into something that they don't need to be poking holes in. And like, I wish that show had received more love. It was relatively successful, but it was doing things in a very cheesy, romantic, easy to watch, fun series that I think was needed because of the broader homogenization of the representations of queer male love that we're beginning to see in BL, which is why, for instance, I'm so excited for Close Friends from GMM next year, because like that's the poly sex mess chaos that I need in my life. That is kind of like, you know, challenging monogamy. What's that?
Monogamy.
And like, you know, challenging some of the kind of romantic entanglements, but it's also, and this is where some of the major kind of reactions against it amongst some fans are quite interesting. It's also challenging the concept of coupling and ships itself. Because, for instance, like you had prominently in the trailer, Neo and Force getting it on. We didn't see that between Force and Book, and that's the ship, right? So I think that that's actually quite necessary, because, you know, it helps to kind of broaden things up beyond the concept of shipping, but at the same time, knowing the way the industry works, all the ships are going to end up happily together in the end. Like,
that's going to be boring. I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Okay, I want to go back to two things. Like, just one, I just want to say, I watched Secret Crush on You, and I took it a little bit different because I saw the friend group not kind of dealing with it, but also kind of getting on toe every time he was like, you stop this. So it wasn't really like, but also I wanted to go back to, and just a little definition for the viewers. What do you mean by queering and when you use it? Like queering this and queering that.
So within academic discourse, and particularly within the kind of radical postmodern, post-structuralist, don't worry about what those words means, traditions that I embed myself in. When we talk about queering, we're not talking about identity categorization. Queering for us is a process. We understand it as a kind of a way of being, a way of doing, not a way of being. So it's a way of understanding and interpreting the world that is about kind of revealing the inherent instability of the fixed common sense notions that exist within society. So to queer something is to challenge norms and deconstruct them. So when I say that it's a queering of X, what I mean is that the media, for instance, produces a way of viewing the world that destabilizes and challenges the concept of default heterosexuality, the concepts of a gendered binary and their active passive relationships. So, and it's something that's also many scholars, and I'm quoting here the work of a very influential queer theorist named Jose Esteban Munoz, who argues that queer is always fundamentally utopian because it looks towards a better future, even if that future is never reached, because the queer project is never over, because when one gain is achieved, for example, marriage equality, then the next step is then brought into being towards a kind of utopic kind of space in which we're all free from the kind of strictures of society that has held people down and oppressed them. So when I talk about BL as a mechanism for queering, I'm particularly interested not necessarily in the genre itself, though I would flag that within the historically heteronormative media landscape of Thailand, it has queered things. But I think more about how the fans who engage with the kind of fandom culture, or the producers who are thinking about using it politically, are queering, using it as a tool that I argue is an aspirational tool within my book. And in particular, I think BL, Thai BL or Japanese BL, like the story that I'm putting together in the book and the theory that I'm developing also focuses on how when these genres move across borders and kind of move across cultures, that process of moving unlocks all of these potentials for queering that may not necessarily exist within the local context that gave birth to them. So, Japanese BL goes to Thailand and then is implicated in Thailand's celebrity culture and televisual culture, and then eventually leads to these debates among fans around political questions. That's an example of how the queer potentials are unlocked through processes. But also, as I said, it's always never there. So the conversations we're talking about now around representation reveal that there's still much, much, much more that can be done. So yes, I hope that answers the question.
I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. But it sounds like it's only until it's economically safe for people to do things that they will do things.
I found that in a lot of when you're talking about representation, also like for me, just noticing who shows up, like in Triage was the first time I saw a half black, half Thai actor. And that was Genta, even though he wasn't the main lead or anything like that. But I was just like, who is this person? And then come and find out they had a long history as being a Thai actor. It was also interesting. I also wanted to watch Triage because it had the guy from A Miracle of the Teddy Bear. But the one thing I did notice is that when he went from side couple to lead, they kind of lightened him up or something like that. It just, he seemed like brighter as a lead, not as I can't really explain it and how I saw it.
You're talking about Tay, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Tay, he was the best boy.
Have you seen him back in the original Two Moons?
I remember and this is the whole thing. I saw him in Miracle of the Teddy Bear, and I was like, I looked at it and it was like, he was in Two Moons. I didn't remember him.
So my response to that is like, I've just been waiting for him to come back. But he's also had a really successful kind of het career in the interim.
But I saw Two Moons way back in the day, and I was like, he was just so forgettable. But then I watched Two Moons again, and I was like, it's good playing and stuff like that. But it was really interesting because Two Moons' character was kind of similar to
Mhm.
A Miracle of a Teddy Bear, but him in Triage, it was totally different.
Yeah, and like, I mean, triage is a from a BL kind of industry perspective was, I mean, it is of course written by quite a prominent author, Samon, but within the story, like it's kind of fantastic elements, and it's kind of more realistic focus on hospital settings as opposed to we're just going to have you in a hospital as a kind of frame narrative. I think. Yeah, it was quite interesting, but you know, this relates to that question of lookism and the aesthetic regimes that exist within Thailand that are heavily impacted by Japanese and Korean popular culture, to the extent that my colleague Dredge Byung-Chu Kang Nguyen, who is at the University of California, Davis, he writes about it as like Thailand has been engaging in what he calls a desire for white Asianism, in which whiteness and paleness is tied to East Asian popular culture and aspirations towards kind of the economic development that that Japan and South Korea has experienced, and as Thailand increasingly turns to look at BL as a kind of soft power resource, and as a kind of transnational Asian popular culture, you know, I think that we're going to probably see increasingly look, as much as I was talking about, like, we need more representation, like the Thai industries are like, well, in order to sell our product in Korea and Japan, which is our new market, they're going to want to increasingly engage in the visibility politics of those countries. So yes, get used to more whitewashing, unfortunately, sadly. Which I'm not happy about. Even when you have like guys like Apo Natowin, who are very tanned and dark, comparative to other actors, you'll see him in his, like, they don't play it up very much, because even within, like, in Thailand, that's a liability, unfortunately, as a celebrity, which is a problem. Like, don't get me wrong, like I'm not justifying this. It's just them's the breaks, and we need more kind of diversity in that aspect as well. I mean, to put it bluntly, like, as much as I celebrate like, you know, the moment we're at now with Thai BL, and I think, Edison, you put it quite rightly, is that now we have the economic viability of the model. Like, we need to demonstrate, like, it does boil down to proving that there is an economic viability to some of these broader things. Or is it okay for niche subcultural content to start beginning to challenge this? And that's the other thing. When something becomes mainstream, it opens up a space of resistance within the subcultural. So as mainstream representation begins to emerge within BL, it opens up spaces in which people can push back against that and produce counter narratives. And like War of Why is a good example of that. Even though I haven't, as I said, watched it all, but it's opened up, now that the industry is recognized and people know that it exists, now there can be a series about problematizing the industry. So there is actually a whole bunch of, and I read a paper about this recently, you know, there's a whole bunch of Thai BL series coming out of Isan, the Northeast region, which is about trying to inject their politics, inject their experience into this. I would love to see something engaging with the Muslim South, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But like, it is beginning to happen, and they're maybe not economically viable, but they exist within an indie space that allows for resistance, and that resistance is quite exciting. And you know, I'm increasingly kind of turning away from some of the, if something's a major production but isn't necessarily doing anything interesting, I'm not going to watch it anymore, because, like, why would I invest time into the same narrative I've seen every single every other show, right? So
I think that sentiment is kind of like spreading across the main audience, which is why we're going to get innovations and more subversive content. And I think narratives focusing more on storytelling instead of, I guess, capitalistic intentions, because I feel like storytelling is the main thing.
If you look at GMM's most recent, like 2023, like in the BL series that they're all pushing there was only one that seemed to be kind of your very stereotypical campus crush. And that was hidden agenda, right? And even that has the Ubum subcouple that's focusing on a very politically engaged, you know, their narrative is going to be about them. They want to get married and have children through IVF, right? But the June Dunk main couple is, I'm a straight guy, I want to date this girl, and like, yeah. I love June Dunk off the screen is, I guess, what I'm going to say here. But yeah, but then everything else was like, you know, Only Friends is, as I said, a gay mess. You have Last Twilight, which focuses on a man going blind. You have the class aspect that is central to the story with Perth and Chimon, which I can't remember, Dangerous Love or something, I can't remember. A Boss and a Babe is just going to be comedy and like, yeah. But set in an office, thank God. Like, it's not like, you know.
I'm tired of them. Can you graduate from school already?
Yeah.
I
think it's important to remember that the predominant consumers in Thailand that's their age, so they want to see stuff that reflects them. But as the audience gets older, we're beginning to see a diversification as well, which is the same is true of Japan. When it first emerged in the 70s, it was all set in boarding schools and actually in Europe. And then as the audience grew older, you know, you've got women and men in their 50s in Japan who still read BL, and they don't want to read about high school crushes. They want to read about like some old man who's tired of life, falling in love in the office and having to navigate that. You know, so and I think that's what's really interesting to me about the Korean BL boom, because like all of the upcoming BLs from Korea right now are based in office romance. And like I have a soft spot for that. Likewise, you know, we've got the historical narrative of I Feel You Linger in the Air coming next year from D-Hub House, which I think is going to be brilliant. And I went to the worship ceremony of that, and I can tell you now, Bright and Nongkun have chemistry, and they are gorgeous. So like, that'll be good. And then there's, what is it, Step by Step, which is the other one. So like a comedy set in the office, like, you know, it's no longer just engineering boys. Hooray.
Yeah.
I know JC is excited for 23.5, which is the Milk Love one.
Yes. Oh God. I am too, because like I think we all knew that Milk and Love would get their series, I think. Or at least I hope everyone realized, because GMM kept on throwing them at us. And like, they have excellent chemistry. They know what they're doing. I think that's going to be a really, and it's important that GMM is doing, taking like female romance and moving it from the subcouple space. Like, that's really significant, because yeah, they flirted with it in a number of series, including Milk Love and Bad Buddy, of course. But this is, I think, the first time they've moved it from the subcouple to be the main focus. And as well as like my brain, who is currently hooked on My School President, is also like, oh yeah, and Fourth and Gemini in it too. So like, I'm looking forward to that one a lot.
Okay, because we have 15 minutes left, I have two last topics that trying to race through, which is queer visibility in BL, and why in a queer space it's still not beneficial for actors to come out, and what the repercussions are for actors who have actually come out, like Kuhart, and then also why this has kind of blown up in Asia and not the West. Like, why are we lagging behind in terms of representation or queer narratives?
Okay, so I think I've shared with Edison previously that, you know, through the course of doing the research that I have done, I learnt that there are actors within the Thai BL industry, as well as most likely in other industries across Asia, who are members of the broader LGBTQ community and yet have not come out. Of course, there are some who have famously come out. Earth, Kuhart, for instance, Fluk Natach, that like they're openly queer or bi. And they've had relatively successful careers, but others who have come out have had not so relatively successful careers. And so I guess through the course of my research, I have learned that there are gay men and bi men, to put it bluntly, active in the industry, including at major companies, and they can't come out. They cannot come out because of the fact that Thailand's media industry is still shockingly conservative. As I've kind of painted this narrative of the financial, like the need for like a financial imperative for these shows to be successful, that's because, you know, at the top of the media kind of chain, for example, we're not talking about GMM TV here, we're talking about GMM Grammy and its relationship to the major broadcasting companies and the government. You know, they are all incredibly old conservative men who have invested into very old and conservative understandings of what society will be. So there are still structural issues within the industry itself that would lead to kind of penalty, if you will, to these people if they were to come out. So whilst you're able to, for instance, perform allyship or hint towards a queerness in your identity, you can't necessarily easily explicitly come out yet. And my hope is that some of these shifts and issues that we're seeing right now, and the desires of fans for this, like, I think will hopefully begin to shift that. I hope to God that that's actually something that will begin to become dislodged. Because whilst I haven't watched it, I'm aware of the fact that one of the kind of narratives of War of Why was about like a real couple who couldn't come out due to their managers not wanting to prejudice their careers. And that's a story we've seen also in Lovely Rider. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of the industry because they're selling products, right? And part of that product is that very problematic notion within East and Southeast Asian celebrity culture of the availability of the star and the kind of centrality of their sexual and romantic availability to the kind of parasocial relationships that emerge. You know, this is why there's dating bans in Japan, for instance. Which is all really gross, like, don't get me wrong. So unfortunately, there are, like, I guess we can take heart in the fact that there are kind of gay men and bi men who act within BL, and like maybe we should be a little bit more sensitive to the fact that they can't come out due to structural reasons rather than call upon them to follow a kind of Western inflected coming out narrative. There's a lot of research within the sociology and anthropology of LGBTQ experience in Asia that focuses on the power and safety of the closet. And I think that that's something, even within Western society, we should always acknowledge and respect, and that coming out is not always safe for everyone. And in fact, I hosted over the last few days a symposium, an academic symposium on queering the Korean wave. So looking at how K-pop fandom and K-pop production from a queer perspective. And we had a lot of kind of self-identified queer scholars from within the Asia Pacific region who, you know, they were saying, I can come out within this space and I can participate in K-pop fandom as a queer fan, but if I were to come out at home, like, it would be catastrophic to my family relations and my socioeconomic stability. That's true of Thailand too. That's true of Japan. That's true of South Korea. You just, as I said, need to look, and I said this earlier, you need to look at what's happened to Holland in South Korea to see just how a heteronormative and homophobic media industry can penalize people for coming out rather than celebrate them. So unfortunately, this is the double bind of that economic imperative, is that whilst it produces a space in which fans can celebrate and explore their queer desires or their desires or what have you, it produces that at the expense of actors active within the industry who are queer not being able to celebrate their queerness. And that, I think, is a paradox that I have no answer to, you know, beyond hoping that the pressure increasingly amongst Thai fans, and that it needs to be Thai fans for it to have any meaningful impact on the industry. So, you know, this is where one of the things that I find concerning is that there is within Thai BL fandom a bit of a gap that is beginning to emerge between Thai fans and international fans and international fans are not a homogenous space in themselves, right? And we need more solidarities, and recognizing as well that Thai fans aren't, Delulu straight girls. Like, that's not it at all. Like, Thai fans are very, very politically active and calling on this sort of stuff. So hopefully, we'll see some shifts soon. But, I'm not optimistic. And this is true as well in North America, Western Europe, UK, what have you. The whole nightmare that Kit Connor had to go through with regards to, being forced to come out due to persistent allegations of queer baiting from LGBTQ fans, right? Like, that just shows how the purity and authenticity politics that is beginning to emerge in some debates over queer media is actually very damaging to some individuals, and that we need to perhaps be a little bit more empathetic to the situations people find themselves in. And yeah, so I know who some of the kind of LGBTQ members of the BL industry are, and some of them are really obvious. Like, and I can't name anyone, but it's not like I looked out, like I didn't go digging for this information. It was more like in dealing with this kind of sad, paradoxical reality, I've learned who is trapped, right? And that's quite sad. Like, yeah, and it's sad. Like, and this, so I don't want to paint too rosy a picture of this industry, because there's still problems that we've raised today in both terms of representation and in terms of production, that hopefully will improve. But God only knows. Yeah. I'm an anthropologist. I look at the present, not the future, sadly. And then the other question was about comparing and contrasting Asia.
Yeah, why is it so successful in Asia, but then in the West you kind of only have, say, Young Royals and Heartstopper or Love Victor or whatever.
Yeah, and there's been a few series that, like, there's been these shows that like have had. In fact, I saw a tweet yesterday about, like, there's been like, oh, here are 4 queer series with black leads, and they've all been cancelled, right? And like, why is that the case? And first of all, anti-blackness, but second, yeah, it's I think that one of the things that's kind of paradoxical, and once again, like, it is about paradoxes, and paradoxes inherently can't be solved. So my job isn't to solve them, it's just to kind of reveal them, perhaps, I think, as a scholar. Is that you have these socially conservative societies across East and Southeast Asia with vibrant and long histories of queer media production that emerge predominantly through heterosexual female women's culture, but then expand beyond those boundaries, hence provides an economic situation that leads kind of conservative media producers and companies to kind of recognize the potentials of BL as an economic thing. And yet in the West, we still have the ludicrous belief on behalf of our, as I said, conservative media industries, that LGBTQ stories are somehow niche. And that is why we see the cancellation. Not to mention the fact that Netflix's model, for instance, is explicitly built around canceling shows, like which I think is becoming increasingly obvious to people. And then there's also, the fact that Disney, with its most recent film, Strange World, I think, I can't remember.
Strange World.
Yeah, and which has, once again, like, not only a queer lead, but also I believe that they're black, or actually I don't know, because Disney didn't actively properly promote the series, because like from family-friendly company, despite the nonsense that the right-wing crazies say about Disney and its woke agenda, actually Disney is like not a progressive company, right? Like, at all, full stop. And in fact, if we're going to talk about tokenism, Disney's right up there. And maybe that's where queer baiting should be directed rather than BL shows from Asia. But anyway, like that is emblematic of that broader issue, that they didn't, not only did they not kind of promote that aspect because they were worried about that potentially damaging this series, they also include it within the series, at least according to, like, because I haven't watched it, but like I read this very decent tweet from a media studies colleague. I can't remember who her name right now. If I could remember, I'd credit her. So apologies to that colleague of mine. But they were talking about how, like, if you think about structurally, yes, it's central to that character, their queerness, but within the narrative, like the physical depiction in the film, there's it's restricted to enough scenes that it could be removed from a censor by censors, so that it wouldn't necessarily be able to, like, you know, so they could screen it in China or screen it in kind of conservative Islamic countries, like, for example. So there's that element as well. So it is a paradox. I can't necessarily like reconcile it, or like it's bizarre. Like, why is the West, which has legal protections and you know, these countries that have, you know, same-sex marriage and so forth. But, you know, when you think about the nightmare that is North America, and, you know, the repeal of Roe v. Wade and the kind of culture war that's going on around groomers and you know, TERFs and everything, like, I think that it's a bit of a misconception that the West is somehow more progressive with regards to sexual issues than Asia, and that maybe we just need to be more particular about, like, aware of the particular situations than creating these monolithic binaries. Because if I, as a queer theorist, monolithic binaries make me uncomfortable. Like, my job is to kind of deconstruct them, right? So yeah. Anyway, that's I guess some not particularly well-developed thoughts on what I think is an important question, Edison.
I also find it very interesting, just going back on that the West, when it does international stuff, it takes out stuff so it could be more palatable. And for when Thailand and places, they actually leave in stuff for it to be more palatable for people.
I think it's interesting. Thailand actually, I think, is, like, the Thai media industries, I don't want to say Thailand, but the Thai media industries have learnt quite well from, in particular, South Korea, which is the model that they're following, on how to use, like, social media and like have learnt how to do this game remarkably well, to the point where, you know, scholars such as myself working within Asian media studies, we're beginning to talk about a Thai wind that is competing against the Korean wave. And, like, I've had so many informants that I've interviewed say, oh, I used to be into Korean stuff, but now I'm only into Thai stuff. And that resonates with me. When I was into Japanese stuff, and now I'm into Korean stuff, and now I'm into Thai stuff. So, like, you know, this is actually something that's quite interesting. It has nothing to do with the Thai government. It has nothing to do with the kind of strategies of these media companies. It's just that it resonates with the desires that are beginning to emerge within these, like, international audiences. And then, yes, economically they focus on the Thai domestic audience, but they know that they can get things trending if they have hot NC scenes that they can't broadcast nationally on TV. But yeah, it's going to play well to the international audiences. So they'll make sure that that's what the international audiences default towards. And then the Thai audiences follow along with streaming services. So I think that's really, it's really interesting.
Okay, I think that's all we have time for. Is there anything we should cover quickly, or no? That's all we have time for. Do you need to go now?
Yes, yeah, I do, because as I said to you guys, I have a meeting directly after. But thank you for providing me the opportunity to chat with you. I hope that I didn't dominate the discussion too much, and that I've been able to share a few kind of provocations, perhaps, that are useful for people to think about.
Now, if anyone's interested in hearing more about Thomas, you can follow him on Twitter. I'm sure there's a link somewhere. But thank you for joining us, Tom Est. It was really interesting and insightful, and I hope we get to do this some other time in some other capacity. Yeah. We'll let you go for now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. So I'll dip out now, guys.
All right,
see you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
How do we? Oh, there we go.
How do we?
Okay, well, that should be it for us. Do you have any concluding thoughts, Daisy? I don't even know. I was trying to listen and process, but my brain was kind of like, bzz.
Well, I mean, of course, if they can't listen and process, you can always look at the video that gets sent up to our channel and watch it again. or watch some of the other stuff that we're going to do, because we still got to do between us.
We gotta watch Between Us after this.
Yeah.
There were so many things I wanted to kind of delve into, but I guess we ran out of time. But yeah, I did want to get into other countries, but he did raise some interesting things about the Philippines and Japan and South Korea. And then hopefully I was gonna, ask about expanding that to other countries as well, because I know Vietnam is doing their own thing, bubbling beneath the surface, and then Singapore is gonna do something hopefully soon. So it's just good to see like the weird intermingled mishmash in which like BL is being driven by not only economic interests, but also like using that vehicle as a method to promote and champion queer rights somehow. And it's like it's different. It's kind of cool that you can do kind of both, like champion queer rights and then also tell a really interesting story at the same time. I don't know how to conclude this. But thank you everyone for who's joined our live. I think that will be us for now. If you enjoyed the talk, there's more of Thomas you can check out, or you could continue supporting us here.
Support
I don't know
us,
how much you contributed
follow
to
us on Twitter. I'm on Twitter sometimes. No, I'm no Twitter. I need to get a new keyboard.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's it for us from Femmes React. We're gonna go watch Between Us now, but we'll see you some other time. Take care of yourself in the meantime, and follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to FCC if you haven't already. And I don't know, you can, if you want to support us extra, you can have a Patreon. But that's it.
All the Korean and JBL.
We watch all the JBLs there
and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Hear me
Okay.
speak Japanese badly. Anyway, see you later.
Bye.
Bye. See you later.